Hi, this is Jim McLennan. Welcome to our podcast. I'd like to go down the road of the modern game versus the classical game, or perhaps you could call it the new game versus the old, or in some other iteration they call it a rotational versus linear. And there's a story that the pros are the ones that invent the game and the teachers are the ones that figure it out sometime later and then start teaching it. And I remember in 1976 I was watching Ash play Connors at Wimbledon. It was a huge match, but seeing it on Tennis Channel recently, I noticed that Ash was hitting reverse forehands, even though that wasn't a term that I ever even knew in the 70s, much less that teachers were teaching until about 5 years ago watching Rafa. So anyway, let's go back to the beginning. Many of us in our first lessons heard the words racket to the back fence, racket to the front fence, racket back to the back fence, racket pointed to the front fence. But now they say it's the opposite. The racket is back pointed to the front fence and they finish pointed to the back. So what I'm doing is I'm standing on an 8 board made by Grail Sports, and it's a very interesting tool that helps with balance and rhythm, but I think for our purposes it really starts to describe the old versus the new. So the first time I got on this thing from a tennis pro, Jack Brody, he said, go ahead and show me the forehand. So I started like this. I can still remember this. And he said, no, Jim, the tail's wagging the dog. I said, I don't know what you mean. And he said, you're initiating from the periphery. I still didn't know what he meant. And so he got on it, and he wagged the racket like this. And you could call it a wag, you could call it a lag, you could call it loosening up, but this look, I believe, is entirely different from this look. And many times on the courts that you're on, if people look stiff, I think you see they take the racket back big, and it initiates from the hand. And if you see somebody who looks flowing, they take it back from the center. So one of the words that I think is very useful in tennis is lag, meaning I'm turning and it takes the racket a moment to catch up. It lagged that way, it lagged this way. So now let me be very specific. The more you lag, the closer the racket stays to impact. The less you lag, the more that can go wrong. Now I'm going to do a whole series of lessons on this 8 board to really try to show people about how to balance and turn and hit. But for our story of old versus new, and in your game, I'm not saying you have to be old or new, but if you're trying to adopt any of the methods of the pros, the trick is to delay taking the racket back and to loosen up when you go forward. Now one other thought, if you want to change the words. To me, the primary term that you would feel or a coach would use is turn and turn again. I'm turning again, I'm balanced, I'm turning again. I'll give you the old-fashioned forehand, and I had one because I was playing in the 60s and 70s. Now let me do my 2 turns with the new one. And what I really want you to see is that all the examples we've had on our site, especially on the network, about the modern forehand, Sharapova and PMAC, it really looks like the racket is doing less, and maybe it's more of a wave motion than something static. So you may or may not want to get an 8 board. You really should work on your balance and your rhythm. But when somebody says, well, tell me what you think about the modern game, you could say, well, of course, it's the dog wagging its tail. And after everyone stops laughing, you might explain it to them, because to me, that's exactly how it looks. Modern tennis, a wave motion, the racket lags in 2 directions, back and forth. Enjoy your tennis, stay at it, keep in touch, drop me a note. I've been at this for quite some time, and I'll be at it for quite some time longer.